Now today's Serbian news coverage of NATO airstrikes on Yugoslavia from government-controlled Radio Television Serbia in Belgrade. This portion of the news was recorded this afternoon and translated here at C-SPAN in Washington, D.C. It's about 35 minutes.
You're watching Primetime News of Radio Television Serbia. Good evening. Today there was a session of the government of the Republic of Serbia. The session was presided over by Mirko Marjanovic. They discussed the measures undertaken against the consequences of the bombardment of civilian facilities committed by NATO. It was stressed that despite the growing condemnation of these attacks by freedom-loving people throughout the world, and despite the growing demands for an end of this aggression, NATO crimes that kill civilian people and destroy the infrastructure and communications of our country continue with every day and get more and more intense. The government says that only the end of the bombardment will enable us to go back to peace and bring the refugees back to their homes. Our country advocates a peaceful and political solution of the Kosovo problems, but is determined to defend its freedom and independence. The government today discussed and adopted the information on the conclusion of the spring sowing activities. They said that as one of the priority tasks in our current situation, the spring sowing activities have been successfully completed. Thanks to all of the measures that have been undertaken, and especially the exceptional engagement of agricultural workers, they have set a record in terms of sowing activities, actually a record for the past 10 years. All of the areas are actually greater than in 1998. For example, 48% more of soybeans, 28% more of sunflower seeds, 14% more of sugarcane, and 3% more of corn has been sown. This successful conclusion, together with all of the measures of the government with regard to agricultural technology, will give us enough agricultural products for export. The President of the Government of Serbia, Mirko Marjanovic, had a working meeting today with the county presidents of the Republic. It was especially stressed that the expressed unity of our people and their leadership, the patriotism of our people, and the heroism of our armed forces and police forces, all of these are our guarantee that we shall persevere in the defense of our territorial integrity and sovereignty, that we shall defend our freedom and independence. The full unity of people in the defense of our national interests demands that each individual and organization continue to fulfill their tasks in the defense of the country against this aggression. It was stressed that the solidarity of our people contributes tremendously to alleviate the consequences of the bombardment. It was also noted that all of the state organs as well as companies responsibly carry out their missions in defense of the country. All of the measures undertaken in order to maintain the economic activities and realize the social programs of the government of Serbia are successfully implemented. All of the inspection services are taking up measures against war profiteering speculation. The enemy alliance attacked throughout Serbia. This is what they attacked. For example, Makeš area near Belgrade and Batajnica, densely populated parts of Šabac, the environs of Kraljevo, Novi Pazar, Kragujevac, Jagodina. 4 missiles hit the relay tower of Radio Belgrade near Obrenovac. The attack on Bački Petrovac damaged the power transfer station, leaving the area without electricity and water. In Kosovo, civilian facilities were targeted. In Klina, Kosovska Kamenica, Vučitrn, Lipljan, 2 missiles hit and destroyed the relay station of Radio TV Serbia near Preševo. This is the effect of the NATO alliance attacks in the area of Šabac. 5 missiles hit an area close to civilian facilities, a football stadium, Mačva, that has already been attacked twice. Huge material damage has been inflicted again on civilian facilities in this part of town. From the consequences of the air raid, 6 civilians have been injured, 1 has been kept in hospital. About 3 o'clock today, the area of Bujanovac was also a target of the NATO alliance. 4 strong explosions were heard to the southeast. For example, the village lands of Bogdanovac, Košarevo, Novo Selo and Lukarno. The aggressor last night once again attacked Belgrade fiercely. Sometime around 3:15 in the morning, they attacked the building of the Internal Affairs of Serbia. This building has been several times hit and damaged so far. Several explosions could be heard from Batajnica and Rakovica. Also targeted were civilian buildings in Užice and Niš, as well as many places in Kosovo. The electric power authorities of Serbia, despite continued work, have difficulty providing electricity around the country. The aggressor attacked several facilities throughout today and inflicted huge material damage. This is what the electric power authorities of Serbia say about this. From the consequences of the aggressor attack, the Obranovac relay stations towards Belgrade do not function as of this morning. The criminal alliance hit the area of Krupin with 2 missiles. This also damaged 2 relay stations near Bački Petrovac. This interruption of service has unfortunately caused even greater difficulties in supplying the Republic with electricity. Despite all measures, there has to be a special regime of electric energy supply. Particular difficulties are experienced by southwestern and northwestern areas of Belgrade, the neighborhoods of Banovo Brdo, Žarkovo, Vidikovac, and the area around it, then Sremčica, Umka, Barajevo, Novi Beograd, Zemun, Surčin, the settlements Dobajovci, Ugrinovci, Batajnica, and Boljevci. Priority is taken into consideration in terms of electric supply. In order to supply all customers, however, the power company of Belgrade is implementing restrictive measures with power installments of about 3 hours at a time per area. The electric power authorities appeal to all customers to abide by the regulations on rational use of electricity due to the danger of new technical disruptions. The Minister of Health, Leposava Milicevic, briefed foreign and domestic journalists at the Army Press Center on the devastating consequences for medical patients caused by water and electricity cuts. The mindless NATO bombardment of electric power plants of Serbia endangers daily, as Dr. Milicevic said, 9,500 intensive care patients, 300 babies, 2,000 kidney patients on dialysis, 400 cancer patients, thousands surgical patients, and all other persons in need. From the beginning of the war against our country, NATO has dropped 10,000 bombs. 115 health institutions are damaged or destroyed. All of this is a crime without precedent. It is interesting that this exceptionally well-attended press conference concluded without a single question from a journalist. After everything that has been said, what can you ask? We have informed you earlier that members of our Navy interrupted on Skadar Lake a smuggling ship with about 80 kilograms of marijuana intended for the markets of Western Europe. The proceeds would have been used to finance the terrorists in Kosovo and Albania. Our TV crew was there on the site, and this is the exclusive report we have. Within the framework of their routine surveys, members of our Navy intercepted on Skadar Lake a smuggling boat where our citizens were trying to smuggle drugs from Albania into Kosovo. They found about 80 kilograms of marijuana intended for resale and then financing arms for KLA. In his review of the event, the commander of the combat boat of our border units, Lieutenant Predrag Đurović, said that the smugglers tried to flee our patrol with a motorboat. There was exchange of fire. One smuggler was wounded. We captured on Skadar Lake 2 illegal people who were trying to cross our borders. These people were captured. They're no longer free, and during that moment we also captured a certain quantity of drugs, currency, and mobile phone. These persons were in the boat that you can see behind us, and now you see 2 soldiers in it who were part of the patrol that was securing the state border. On the basis of the first indicators and investigation, these drugs were intended to be sold in Western Europe. The full investigation is underway. The General Director of the UN for Science and Culture, Federico Mayor, has officially appealed for an end of the bombardment of Yugoslavia and passing of a resolution regarding the contested issues within the UN. Force can only increase suffering, helps nothing, states the announcement of the UNESCO. In Moscow, there are further diplomatic activities towards the political regulation of the crisis in Kosovo, meetings between Russian and American and Russian and Indian officials. Viktor Chernomyrdin stressed that Russia will insist even further end of the bombardment on Yugoslavia. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Igor Ivanov, repeated today during his meeting with the Foreign Minister of India, Jaswanta Singh, the position of Russia that the solution of the crisis in Kosovo is possible only by political means, that it is necessary with joint engagement to offer proposals that could stop the tragedy in Yugoslavia. He stressed that India, a country that shares many of the same ideas, including the view on Kosovo with Russia, is deserving to be permanent member of the UN Security Council. It is expected that Ivanov should discuss tonight the political means of resolution of the crisis with the Deputy Secretary of State of the US, Thrope Talbot, before tomorrow's three-way meeting of Chernomyrdin, Ahtisaari and Talbot. Ivanov stated that there are significant differences between Russia and the US regarding the approach to the political resolution of the Kosovo crisis, that the US doesn't show enough political will to really end this conflict as soon as possible and stop the bombardment, that the daily attacks on the civilian targets have led to problems in terms of the functioning of the public services in larger cities. Concrete measures will have to be discussed further in Stockholm between Ivanov and the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. The special envoy of the Russian President for Yugoslavia, Chernomyrdin, said that Russia will express its opinions much more strongly and its demands as well regarding the end of the bombardment. However, Chernomyrdin did not precise as to whether we're talking about verbal appeals to the West or perhaps some concrete measures. However, he also denied some rumors about his alleged disagreements with Igor Ivanov with regard to Kosovo. Chernomyrdin claims that he is continually in touch with the foreign minister of Russia and that with respect to the Kosovo conflict, they're simply implementing the line and the position adopted by President Yeltsin. All Indian media report on the statements of the Foreign Minister Jaswanta Singh after the meeting with Chernomyrdin that Kosovo can be resolved only by political means. India and Russia demand an immediate halt in the bombing campaign because, as it was said in Russia, that's the prerequisite for a diplomatic solution and return of the role of the UN. The president of the Foreign Affairs Ministry of China repeated that NATO has to end its actions against Yugoslavia. Beijing said that Yugoslavia as a sovereign state cannot be imposed upon any solutions, but solutions have to be brought about in conclusion, in connection with Yugoslavia. In Beijing, there was a meeting between the commander of the Chinese army, Fu Chuanyou, and the commander of the Russian Navy, Vladimir Koradov. They said that they have to continue their actions in order to stop the NATO bombardment. China rejected again the U.S. allegations about its theft of American nuclear secrets. Beijing notes that this campaign regarding the spying affair in the U.S., which is motivated primarily by domestic politics and the need for continued confrontations with China, will damage further the cool relations between U.S. and China after the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. The Athenian daily Athenaiki reports that China supports fully the joint Greek-Czech initiative for the peace in the Balkans. The initiative was presented in Beijing by the Foreign Affairs Minister of Greece, Yorgos Papandreou. Chinese officials said that they give full support to the peaceful resolution of the Kosovo crisis. This means that the UN, as the only responsible international organization authorized to take care of such problems, should continue to participate actively in negotiations with Yugoslavia. Official Paris reports that during a phone call, President Chirac and the British Prime Minister Blair expressed determination with regard to the alliance goals for Kosovo. They also expressed hope that the G8 proposals will soon lead to to a common opinion with Russia that would open the road for a UN resolution regarding the solution of the Kosovo crisis. The head of the Italian diplomacy, Dnevnik, expressed moderate optimism regarding the resolution of Kosovo crisis. Italy continues to advocate diplomatic and political means, which is confirmed by the news agency ASA, which sees the return of the Italian ambassador to Belgrade as one more positive signal from Rome. The Ukrainian parliament demanded an end of the NATO aggression against the sovereign state of Yugoslavia. From Kiev, they appealed to all European parliaments and the interparliamentary associations of Europe to use all means of political influence in order to end these missile attacks against Yugoslavia. The Ukrainian parliament calls upon the Interparliamentary Assembly of the Union of Independent States to unify their efforts towards the end of this aggression and give technical as well as humanitarian assistance to our country. The war against Yugoslavia has deepened misunderstandings and has created a total tragedy in the Balkans that is becoming a European problem. Against the destruction of civilian targets and the endangering of the Yugoslav population as a whole, there is one more voice from the Human Rights Watch. In their protest because of the latest attacks on electric power and water supply systems, this human rights organization states that such attacks do not contribute to peace nor to NATO's desired goals. Belgian media stress that NATO's attacks on the electric power system of Serbia involved graphite bombs as well as conventional missiles. Libre Belgique notes that many cities of Serbia are without electricity and water. 2 months after the aggression, Kosovo crisis has only deepened and threatens to engulf Europe. The Supreme Commander of NATO, Wesley Clark, stated that he opposes end of the bombing despite contrary views of some alliance members. General Secretary Javier Solana added that the strategy continues, but also the political dialogue. The Paris daily Le Monde points out some commonalities of the NATO country leaders advocating the aggression. All of them are born between 1945 and 1955 and don't really know what war is. Clinton comes from a country that has never been bombed. Instead of military honor, we have now shamelessness in the world that makes civilians both hostages and victims. Adding that US is the main instigator of this dirty war, the paper notes that Europe should be concerned by a catastrophe inflicted upon one European country. America is a country leading in illiteracy. Every 150th US citizen is in prison. Is this a nation that Europe should trust with care for human rights? American media continue to write about the humanitarian catastrophe caused by NATO's attack on electric and water systems. New York Times reports on the shocking statements from Pentagon officials who claim that electric and water systems are legitimate military targets. Even though American media are controlled, you can see that the actions of NATO are mindless and civilians are their primary targets. Washington Post cites Pentagon officials that NATO's goals include the civilian suffering. The delegation of interagency mission of the UN that, to remind you, has been in our country for about 10 days, visited the rubble left behind the facilities in Čačak that were attacked. To remind you also, Čačak has been attacked 12 times so far. While sirens announced possible air raids, Čačak was visited by the interagency mission of the UN this morning. They've been visiting our country for 10 days so far to see the consequences of the evil attacks on our country. As to the scope of the destruction of the greatest company in Čačak, Sloboda, this delegation was briefed by the General Director. About 5,000 workers and 20,000 family members have thus been left without livelihood. The destruction of this most famous factory in Čačak has inflicted material damage of about 300 million German marks. They also visited the rubble of the Cer factory in the industrial zone of Čačak, also destroyed during the bombing. All production plants are destroyed. This was a factory geared towards the agriculture, producing drying machines for fruits and vegetables. The members of the Regional Crisis Committee and government told the Interagency Commission from the UN that from the beginning of the aggression, 5 people in Čačak have died and 27 have been injured. It is also worrisome that there are many secondary consequences of the daily bombardments by NATO. The interagency humanitarian mission of the UN, headed by Sergio de Mello, Under-Secretary of the Secretary-General of the UN, visited yesterday and this morning also the Užice region. They visited several civilian facilities that were targets of the NATO alliance air force, the rubble of the post office, the destroyed bridges in Prijepolje, Kokinbrod and Bistrica, and saw the film on the destroyed medical facility on Zlatibor mountain. The representatives of the Zlatibor area also briefed them on the effect of the aggressor attacks on the national parks. The president of the Interim Executive Council for Kosovo, Zoran Anđelković, met today with the representative of the International Red Cross for Yugoslavia, Dominique Defour, and the head of the Red Cross Office for Kosovo, Edita Bersvil. It was concluded that during these past 2 months of the aggression, the state bodies managed to provide timely assistance to all of the persons that were endangered and needed such assistance. Thus, they have somewhat alleviated the humanitarian tragedy, and the return of the Red Cross to Kosovo will be further stimulation to continue working on such issues. The head of the Red Cross mission, Dominique Defour, said that International Red Cross is reopening its office in Pristina that will contribute to the delivery of the humanitarian assistance to those who are most endangered and most in need. But as Defour added, until the end of the bombardment, humanitarian workers will have a much harder task. The consequences of the NATO bombardment on Yugoslavia over the past 2 months have inflicted a lot of material damage. This is why our people in the diaspora have begun a lot of humanitarian actions to collect assistance for our country. More and more people of the countries where our citizens live join them. Thus, for example, the Association of the Serbs from Temișoara in Romania sent a very important contingent of blankets, and another organization sent medicine valued at 117,000 German marks. From Denmark, a new truck has arrived with humanitarian assistance with 21 tons of food out of a contingent valued at $1 million. This humanitarian assistance package was delivered through Kosovo Made, an organization from Copenhagen, which has been assisting our country for 6 years. Their founder is Mr. Budimir Božović, person who has lived for 30 years in Denmark. Now he is retired and dedicates all of his time to this mission of humanity. All of us who live outside our country, we can and we want to help because our people deserve this. Because these are people who stand still even though they're wounded. They sing and they die and sing. People who really have to be admired, and one should be proud of them, that we are part of that people. Mr. Božović used this visit to his country to see who needs the help the most. He also talked about organizing a food kitchen in Kragujevac. So far, the trucks of Kosovo Maiden organization have brought about 12 contingents of assistance to our country. This NATO aggression has stimulated even greater assistance. Against the NATO crimes in Yugoslavia, just as over the past 60 days we have heard from political organizations and parties. The historic victory of the Serbian people gives force to Yugoslavia today to persevere against all evils of NATO, especially the psychological torture of our people, said Aleksandar Rastović, member of the executive board of the Socialist Party of Serbia, during the visit to Ruma County and his interview for Radio Srem. The unity of all relevant political parties, the unity of our people and leadership have thwarted the evil calculation to serve for the 50th birthday of the alliance of the most developed nations and enslaved Serbia. This is how we have already won morally. Expressing the admiration of the people for our army and police in their defense of our country, Rastović stressed that together with this fight, there are intense political and diplomatic initiatives in order to bring political solution to the Kosovo problem within the UN. Our destiny is in our hands. This is how it was in the past and will remain in the future, concluded Aleksandar Rastovic, member of the Executive Council of the Socialist Party of Serbia. The presidency of the Serb Radical Party stresses that the Serbian people have shown courageous defense against technologically superior aggressor and thus have shown to humanity at large that the defense of one's fatherland has no price. The aggressor that continues mercilessly to attack us has failed to reach any military goals. The most significant results of NATO are the destructions of civilian facilities and killing of innocent civilians. The presidency of the Serbian Radical Party feels that the sacrifice of our people at the altar of the fatherland oblige all our citizens to never surrender to the aggressor regardless of the intensity of their evil actions. The presidency of the Serb Radical Party adds that all of the state bodies of our country, even under most severe war circumstances, have confirmed their patriotism and diligence in carrying out their tasks in order to provide all the necessary functions for the citizens. Some of them have functioned even better than during peacetime. The presidency of the Serb Radical Party expects that some of the world powers, especially China, Russia and India, will follow the example of the courageous resistance of the Yugoslavs to the American Nazism, and that in the interest of all of humanity they will oppose these criminals of the New World Order. The Secretary for Information and spokesman of the Yugoslav left, Ivan Markovic, stated that Yugoslav left has asked the federal government and all authorized bodies to take immediate measures of protection for all of the members of the families of those who lost their lives in this aggression or were left disabled. The Yugoslav left believes that these families need to be given material security. They need to be taken care of. That means that the state has to take care of their employment, education of children, their social, health and other needs. All of our citizens have been heroic in this struggle, despite the fact that they've been exposed to frightening violence. Those who gave their lives for the freedom are the real heroes. The loss of their families can never be compensated for, but their future in freedom gained with human lives can be made somewhat easier. The draft proposals were submitted to various state officials by members of the Yugoslav left. The Serbian Renewal Movement appreciates all peace initiatives, especially by the Russian envoy Chernomirdin, but deems that slow and asks for a more immediate inclusion of our federal government in negotiations. This was said by the president of this party, Vuk Drašković. He added, based on the UN Charter, with respect for sovereignty of nations, as well as based on the G8 resolutions that advocates the end of this, as Drašković said, criminal and collective punishment of an entire nation, one should create conditions for political solution of the crisis. He stressed that Serbia is a democratic state, government can be changed only by elections. It is a moral bankruptcy that NATO believes that they will change our government by bombing of civilian facilities. Our country is a moral victor in this war because they opposed the mindlessness of the greatest aggressors. They have been exposed to the greatest Holocaust after Second World War. In response to foreign journalists as to alleged anti-war protests, he said that these in Aleksinac and Kruševac were anti-NATO demonstrations used by Western media for their propaganda. As to the alleged stories of desertions among our troops, he said that these stories were served with the beginning of the withdrawal of our forces. This is a propaganda war that Serbian people will not succumb to. The Democratic Party of Serbia said that last night's attack on the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Serbia, close to a hospital center, is once again a barbaric act of the aggressor who wants to create new victims and an atmosphere of fear and thus reach some of its goals that it has failed to reach. Obviously, they think that the murder of innocent civilians is one of the ways to reach the desired goals. That can certainly not be called a humanitarian action. This was stressed by the Democratic Party of Serbia. In one of the great industrial centers of Ukraine, there was a great mining accident. Specifically, the disaster happened in Donetsk Basin, one of the largest coal mining areas in the world. The number of miners killed in the explosion of methane gas in this mine near Donetsk has risen to 39. There is fear of more casualties. 46 miners are hospitalized, 78 have been rescued from the mine. According to the officials, at the moment of the explosion, there were 550 workers inside the mine, 180 were in the vicinity, about 1,000 meters underground. The Yugoslav ambassador to Belgium, Nikola Čicanovic, sent a letter today to the Belgian vice president and the Minister of Telecommunications in Brussels, as well as to the Belgian Institute for Postal Service and Telecommunications, prompted by the information that RTS Sat intends to stop the satellite transmission of the Serbian TV. Čicanovic asks the authorities not to support such a discriminatory measure and reminds them that Radio Television Serbia is one of the shareholders of RTS Sat. He addressed a similar letter to the International Journalist Association in Brussels. Radio Television Serbia, for your information, is the most present Yugoslav media both in Europe and throughout the world over the past 2 months, that is to say over the past 60 days of aggression against Yugoslavia. Radio Television Serbia is, despite everything, a greater source of information for all Western media than all other media from our country. This is a result of its comprehensive reach via satellite about the truth about the NATO aggression on Yugoslavia to all of the Western media. The numerous exclusive video reports of our production are among the most used materials by the European electronic media. The Western media have been using the information on the events in our country via the news agency Tanjug, our radio, and the TV station B. Their use of other media is almost negligible in comparison. At the Faculty for Traffic and Infrastructure in Belgrade, Professor Vujadin Rešević, the Dean, and Marinko Biljanović, the Director of the Railroads of Republika Srpska, signed an agreement on long-term technical cooperation. According to the Dean, this agreement should provide for better exchange regarding technology, organization and management of the railroads, as well as the education and training of all of the adequate personnel. The entry of traffic engineers into the railroad service of Republika Srpska, as well as their faster engagement with all aspects of operations. This has already begun because graduates of this faculty are already employed in the railroad service of Republika Srpska. They also discussed the draft agreement on the transport center in Doboj that will be the basis for other similar projects in Republika Srpska. At the traffic department of the university, despite this criminal aggression, the students can take their exams as well as graduate and pursue their master's and doctoral degrees. From the beginning of the aggression, 16 students have graduated from this department. Their professionalism is given to the Republic of Serbia to allow most of the infrastructural system to continue functioning. The following report is about the places from which the Belgrade people from the beginning of the aggression have shown their greatest love for their country, the Belgrade bridges. Bridges are for poets, symbols of love and friendship. For builders, challenge and conquest of nature. There are, of course, bigger and historically more significant bridges, but for the citizens from the left and right side of Danube, the Pančevo Bridge is exceptionally important. Not only is it an aspect of their daily life, but it's a symbol of their unity in the defense of our beautiful country.
Jugoslavia,
Bridges have always been very significant. They always connected cities and people, life from both sides of a river. Under these circumstances, their significance is even greater, and their value is confirmed every day by all of these people who watch over these bridges for 63 days. The bridges that we have been guarding for the past 63 days are also our first line of defense. I have a message from this bridge for all of my friends, all of the citizens of Montenegro and Serbia, especially for the Montenegrins. As long as you can hear the voice of these people and the bridges, Serbia is here. We have gathered here to give support to our armed forces and defend our bridges from the aggressor. We shall protect these bridges, we shall protect these people under the wise leadership of President Milosevic and the army of Yugoslavia that defends our country.
For more on the military action in Yugoslavia, click onto our website. There you can watch daily newscasts from Serbian television and other events, including briefings from the Pentagon and State Department. Our address, cspan.org. This morning at 9 Eastern.